Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of For Checking TV. I'm your host, Doug Lackey, and alongside me is my co-host, Scotty Porterfield. Scotty, we're back. We took like a small year hiatus because of all the crazy stuff we had going on in our lives, but how we doing?
We are here, man. I feel like with that break, we didn't miss a whole lot in terms of just Penguins hockey. It wasn't like we had playoffs forward to this year. I think the last one we did was late October, early November, and you could already see the writing on the wall that this was not going to be our typical year of Pens hockey. And here we are, Stanley Cup Finals, and the Penguins didn't even make it to the dance for the first time in what was it, 17 years. So a lot has changed, and that's what we're here to get into today.
Yeah, you know, and honestly, that whole missing the playoffs for the first time in 17 years thing, yeah, it sucks, but honestly, it might have ended up being a blessing in disguise because the trickle down effect of them missing the playoffs caused the Panthers to make it in as an 8 seed, get hot, knock off the Maple Leafs in the second round, and got Kyle Dubas fired from Toronto. And inevitably, as of yesterday, Kyle Dubas is the president of hockey operations for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So as of right now, he will maintain full control through July, go through the RFA, UFA period, probably go through a little bit of free agency until he decides to hire a general manager. But first off, like, what are your first thoughts on this? I mean, I feel like this is like for you and I, this is probably like the most ideal scenario that could possibly play out.
Definitely. I mean, you could kind of see the writing on the wall as the playoffs moved along. You could see that there was a pretty good chance that Toronto was going to move on from Kyle after falling short again, and obviously losing to the Panthers. And by the way, before we even go there, I do want to touch real quick on Florida. Like you were talking about the trickle down effect, obviously. Do they even go on this run if the Penguins don't completely crap the bed and miss the playoffs like that? I
No,
mean,
because odds are they didn't even make the playoffs if the
no,
Pens won out, you know?
that's right. Like, and so I'm just saying, if I'm Ron Hextall, I'm probably asking for a ring from Florida. I think that's be the least they could do, get some type of compensation for walking out of here. But anyway, just want to throw that
Yeah.
out there. Florida doing a great job. But back to Dubas. Yeah, like I said earlier, the writing was on the wall. It seemed pretty evident that this was going to happen. I mean, everyone had been, kind of joking at the idea of, oh, he's, when he's up in the press box, checking his phone, he's like, oh, he's looking at Cat Friendly, seeing what he has to do with the Penguins roster. And then here we are. It's June 2nd, and Kyle Dubas is now running the show. So I'm very excited about it. I feel like this is, I don't want to say new territory, I guess, but it kind of is in a way. And it's also, you know, a different type of hockey operations that we're used to seeing, I guess, from the Penguins. We've had a couple old school guys as of late, if you want to, with Rutherford and Hextall and Burke, obviously. Now you kind of get into that new age analytical type of approach to a team. I don't think we really have had that in the past, and now we see just how much Dubas is going to rely on it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he has planned here for the Penguins, because the next 3 to 4 weeks are going to be very hectic for him, and they could really shape how the next few years of this franchise's future is going to go.
Yeah, and I feel like that's probably the biggest takeaway is this is going to be the most process oriented like management group that we've had probably in our lifetime. I know that Shiro, although he had a great run, wasn't very forward thinking. He got very, very lucky in some trades. Same goes for Jim Rutherford, and then obviously the whole Hextall Prior thing. I mean, an article came out that literally chronicled about how they both thought that they were smarter than Fenway Sports Group, which is just hilarious. Just absolutely hilarious. And I feel like this is a great step forward, because the biggest and another big thing with Dubas for me is when you look at the Penguins, what do they need? They need bottom six help. And one thing that Kyle Dubas has been fantastic at over the past 2 to 3 years with the Maple Leafs has been building out a bottom six, especially this past offseason.
Definitely.
I mean, you and I both know like that bottom six was so well put together that they were putting Alex Kerfoot and Cal Yarncroke with Austin Matthews on the top line, and they were both producing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not making Matthews look like he had to carry them, you know? Um, and I mean, like that's what they need. They need to completely rebuild the bottom six. I was also shocked at how in depth he went in about defense in his press conference yesterday. It made it sound like it's not like a hey, we just have to replace Brian Dumoulin. It made it sound like hey, we got to make like 2 to 3 moves to improve our defense. And right away, whenever he says that, you immediately think, okay, like what's the future hold for Jan Ruda, and what does the future hold for Jeff Petrie, even though he's bind to a no movement clause.
Yeah, when I was watching his press conference live, and the one thing I kept remember him saying that just kept replaying over and over in my head was, "We'll see what the market looks like." And he kept saying that on numerous occasions. That made me think, wow, he's really gonna, explore all his options here. He's gonna see, hey, what can I get for these guys? What are they worth? Let's find out what I can pull off here. He doesn't, and that's expected, of course, when you have a new GM come in. He's not really married to anybody. I mean, outside of probably the core three, the big three. I don't think he's looking at anybody else saying, okay, I have to keep these guys. Maybe Gensel to an extent, but it seemed like everybody else, they were free game, and he's gonna assess what they want to do and with those players, and we could see quite the shakeup here, depending on which way he goes. I'm sure, obviously, he has to talk with a lot of the players and determine, hey, do I like this guy? Can he fit in with what I'm trying to achieve here? That's going to be a big contributing factor. They talked a lot about Tristan Jarry too. He says he wants to, talk with Jarry and say and assess, hey, where are we at with him? Can I win with this guy? Those are things that he obviously has to figure out. And again, he doesn't have a huge window to do it. It is going to be going on here pretty soon before, we get down to crunch time. But I think he's going to be taking the right approach to it so far.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be hard. Like they have $20 million in cap space, which is a lot to work with given the fact that the core is locked up, but you have to think it with that 20 million, you need to sign a 1 to 2 goalies, a top 6 left winger to most likely replace Jason Zucker, and a top 4 defenseman, potentially a top pairing defenseman to replace Brian Dumoulin.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a lot of money. And obviously, you think about certain players that he could move or potentially buy out, i.e. Mikael Granlund. And you think, okay, if you buy out Granlund, you're able to move all of Petrie's contract off the books and all of Ruda's contract off the books. That's about 13 to 14 million extra dollars to work with. So then you can go get a top 6 guy, go get that top pairing D. And then I'm of the thinking that they bring Jarry back on a 1-year prove it deal. But if they do that, they have to move Casey DeSmith, and they have to get Tristan Jarry a legitimate 1A, 1B goaltender to run with him. Because I'm under the impression that a lot of the problems that Jarry's gone through over the past few years is a testament to him needing to play 65 plus games a year. If he's not playing 55 to 65 games a year, odds are his body holds up, his workload will stay fresh, and he's not going to collapse in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's been one, just referring to Jarry at least. This was this year, and I guess parts of the last season as well, where that's really where we saw the injuries start to hit him pretty hard. I mean, everyone talks about how pitiful he was in 2021. I think in that case, all he really needed was a training camp. You know, that whole season was just thrown together at at the last minute, sort of, when you really think about it. They didn't have a lot of time to prepare for the new season and everything. And that's why he had such a sloppy start. You saw how in 2022, it's like, okay, we're gonna stick with this guy. And look, he goes through a full training camp, he does his full usual process that he's been doing ever since he got drafted. And it's like, okay, this is what we're back to seeing now. This guy's okay. Now you look forward to this year. There were times early on in the year where he was standing on his head, playing really well, and then the injury bug hits because, again, you don't have a lot of faith in the guy coming in behind him. You know, there would be flashes where you're thinking, all right, Casey DeSmith will be okay. We can work with this guy. And then there'd be other minutes where you're like, oh my gosh, why is this guy our backup? How is this guy an NHL backup? You know? So I think, like you said, Doug, it comes down to, a lot of it's just going to come down to, you know, where do we have backup goaltending wise that can provide a little bit of stabilization for Tristan Jarry, because that's the one thing he seems to be missing right now. And I think once he gets that, you know, hopefully it'll be smooth sailing for him.
Yeah, you know, and I think the whole thing you have to look for is like you have to look for a guy that's capable of being a number one for stretches. You know, I think the biggest indicator is like look at what the Golden Knights were able to get out of Aiden Hill this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with all those injuries, even though they had two bona fide number one goalies in Logan Thompson and Laurent Brossoit. You know, and I think this is also going to be a really true test for Kyle Dubas because in his history as a general manager around the league and as an executive around the league, he has a horrible track record at finding and developing goaltending. You know, his best find was probably Ilya Samsonov this year.
Mm-hmm.
And he completely just fell off the map in the playoffs once they got to the second round. You know, but like I'm intrigued about the bottom six because you have to think like they have three of the pieces already there, in my opinion, with Drew O'Connor, Ryan Poehling, and Alex Nylander.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can count Jeff Carter. We all know that they're not going to be able to move Jeff Carter, but I also am led to believe he's not really going to play a whole hell of a lot this year.
They're going to be putting him in the press box a lot. That's what we've all wanted, obviously. I mean, it's just we don't need to get into Carter's play. Obviously, it took a nosedive. We've beat that horse till it's dead, so there's no sense in even getting into it. But like you said, with the bottom six, yeah, that's been one that's going to be really interesting. You know, like you said, we got the three guys locked up with Nylander, O'Connor, and who's the other guy? Who's the other one? I forgot it. You just mentioned, was it Poehling?
Ryan Poehling.
Poehling.
Yeah,
Okay,
Ryan
right.
Poehling.
Thank you. So those three are your lockdown guys. You still have to fill in for, you're losing Archibald, Bonino, and Heinen out of your bottom six. I mean, there were times where you can look at Archibald and say, okay, he's working hard, he's drawing penalties. That was probably his biggest contributing factor to the team this year was, hey, I'm at least going to be mucking and grinding in the corners and someone's going to get pissed at me and whack me in the ankle and I'll take a penalty. So me personally, I find some value in that, not enough for it to, you know, throw a decent amount of money at the guy. But again, checked what the market is. I wouldn't mind seeing him come back per se. I don't think that would be the biggest, you know, issue honestly, because again, not every guy is going to light the lamp like crazy or at least pot 10 or 15 goals. But if they can do those other things that in a way help your team score goals like that, like getting or drawing those penalties, you're good to go. With Bonino and Heinen, I mean, I think Bonino's pretty much walking, and Heinen, as much as we, you know, tried to hope that he would figure it out, it's just you can't go 20 or 30 games without goals. It's just not going to work.
The whole him taking the pay cut to run it back thing, it sucks, but it was a colossal failure.
Yeah.
It didn't work out. A lot of it probably wasn't even his fault because there was no play driving forward on his line for a majority of the year. You know, I think a lot of the magic in Danton Heinen came from playing alongside Evan Rodriguez. That year that him and Erod both popped off. But Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that they're going to need is like, I liked what Dubas said about he has to find guys with some utility to their game. Like they need when they sign a third line center or trade for a third line center, they ultimately have to be ready and be defensively capable enough to be their PKAs.
Yeah.
Like they need to find like the 2023 equivalent to 2016 Nick Bonito
Mm-hmm.
in terms of being able to both kill penalties and be able to put the puck in the back of the net. You know, I think that they also need other like a PK capable winger to go with that third line. You know, I think somebody that might be interesting due to the combination of skill and size would be, if the Islanders let him walk, would be Pierre Engvall.
Mm.
Somebody that Dubas is familiar with,
Yep.
has good reach, can play a somewhat physical game, and he has a very good underlying numbers and is capable of potting at least 12 to 15 goals. And that's what they need.
And that's really all. Yeah, and exactly. And that's all you're asking for too.
Yeah.
Like you don't need a guy who's gonna, in that position at least, you don't need a guy who's gonna put home 20 or 25. It's like, hey, give me my 10 to 15,
Right.
kill some penalties, keep us in that upper percentile of the league, and let's run. I think if you get that, you're all good. And I think that's what the Penguins definitely needed, like you said, Doug. So that would be a welcome addition. And another thing we've kind of talked about is, how many guys could Dubas really, sway over to Pittsburgh, whether it's a connection with Toronto or Sault Ste. Marie. Could guys want to come play for this team? Not only to play for Dubas, but also, hey, I get to play with Crosby and Malkin. What kind of guys could they potentially make something happen
Yeah.
with?
And I think, another selling point is I get to be coached by Mike Sullivan.
Right.
I think that that's a very, very underrated selling point in this entire process. Leafs guys from like last year that I'd be looking at is like, if they want to go separate ways with Paling and they need a fourth line center to be a true PK ace, whether it be for PK1 or PK2, David Camp would be ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like ideal. Like he would be better than Teddy Bluger at his peak.
Mm.
And I feel like Mike Sullivan would have a lot of fun coaching Alex Kerfoot
Mm-hmm.
with the positional flexibility he brings and the lineup flexibility he brings, being able to go from like a line one, line two player to a true bottom sixer. You know, um, and then obviously I said Pierre Engvall. I like this. This is my thing. Like this is like my thing for the summer is I want Pierre Engvall. Um, but other than that, like it'll be interesting to see like if Tree Living is willing to trade with Dubas, because like if Tree Living is willing to trade with Dubas, like, and for whatever reason Brad Tree Living goes into his office and says, for whatever reason, I just hate Jake McCabe. I hate that Jake McCabe's on my roster. You take that and run, because Jake McCabe could be your number one D with Letang at only $2 million per for the next 2 to 3 years. Like that's insane value. Um, as for Sault Ste. Marie guys, like there's so many guys out there, and it kind of scares me because Carter's a Sault Ste. Marie guy.
Oh, geez. I didn't even know.
Yeah, Carter's a Sault Ste. Marie guy, and like Carter was probably playing in Sault Ste. Marie whenever Kyle was like
The stick
in
boy,
high school.
whatever he
Like,
was doing. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like, but yeah, I mean they have a lot of options, and I think the biggest thing is they need to become flexible enough with the cap in order to be able to pay a third line center $4.5 to $5.5 million per year. In my opinion, I would say at least 4.5 to 5, because my whole thing's this is if you're able to bet on somebody that is good, like say somebody like JT Compher, that's the type of support that the core needs right now, you know?
No
because
doubt. I mean,
if there's an injury, that guy could go be your two.
you think it's gonna be that? You think it would cost that much though? Like just the concept of paying $5 million to a third line center is kind of, you know,
But if hear me out, but if it's like a Sam Bennett or like Dylan Strome type third line center,
yeah,
like
absolutely. Then
it's it's
yeah,
money, you
of
know?
course, yeah. That's where it would be acceptable too. Is where it's
Yeah,
like, okay, if I'm paying you this money, you're the cream of the crop.
right,
You know, there's no
right.
one who plays your position better than you at third line center. So if that's
Right.
the case, then absolutely go for it. But like when that's a guy that if you're going to spend that money, you better make sure that the guy's number one at what he does without question.
Hell, who's to say that like they couldn't cycle their market onto Ryan O'Reilly?
They could
I
definitely.
feel like I feel like that's like good thought because like you have to think like if he signs here, he's probably going to be playing with Alex Nylander. At at this point in Nylander's career, that's Ryan O'Reilly's the type of player he needs to play with. You know, like veteran guy would be basically another captain in the room. And whenever the guy gets into the playoffs, his motor just goes like a million miles an hour,
Yeah,
and he can kill penalties.
very well too. Yeah.
Yeah, like super well. I would go as far as saying Jordan Stahl, but I think we all know that he's going to stay in Carolina.
Yeah, I saw a report too that it's like very unlikely that he ends up coming back here to Pittsburgh. But I mean, O'Reilly, you look at him, he's 31 years old. Will be 32 at the start of the season. So obviously everyone's going to be like, oh, here's another old guy coming to Pittsburgh. But again, if it's one of those roles where you can, possibly make the younger players around you better, i.e. Alex Nylander or Drew O'Connor, I'm for it. I'd like to see what can happen because, I mean, I don't know how closely you or anybody has been following the World Championship so far. Drew O'Connor got selected to Team USA and was literally lighting the world on fire with how well he was playing over there. And obviously, the Team USA roster is not going to be elite by any means. There were just guys who missed the playoffs for the most part, but from what I saw, I was pretty impressed with it. That shows that he can, he has that capability to be that kind of player and provide that depth scoring that ultimately teams need in order to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and I'm probably like the biggest Drew O'Connor supporter in the world, or one of. And I think that all they need to do with O'Connor is like put him with somebody who's capable of driving play.
Mm-hmm.
Like an ideal fourth line pairing as two forwards would be honestly him and David Kampf if Kampf ends up walking from Toronto. You know, it's just you got to figure out how to fill out all the other little spots. Um, and honestly, like if things don't go well with his market in Colorado, like I guarantee you, like I will guarantee you, I have heard this from people and I have read this before. Mike Sullivan never wanted Evan Rodriguez to leave.
No.
And if this event were to present itself, I guarantee you Mike Sullivan would be in Kyle's ear telling him about how badly he needs this guy.
And Kyle is smart enough to realize that Evan Rodriguez can contribute a lot to this roster too.
Yes.
He already
Yes.
has.
Yes.
So there's still a lot of familiarity there between him and a good bit of the roster. So yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
And my other idea would be potentially like getting an entire new third line and then setting up your fourth line, kind of like how Seattle did with Ryan Donato, Morgan Geekie, and Daniel Sprong, where it would be O'Connor, a fourth line center, and Alex Nylander.
That's an interesting one. I personally think that Alex Nylander is ready to take the jump as a third line winner. I see him
Okay.
more as a fit for a third line guy. I feel like if you're gonna have that fourth line guy, you need him to, bang bodies in the corners and, do what he can at the front of the
Right.
net. I don't really see Nylander being that type of player. I've at least from the small sample size that we've had with him, he's
Yeah.
never seemed like that type of guy. So me personally, I'd prefer to see Nylander on the third line, but I
Yeah.
could definitely get away with O'Connor on the fourth. That's one where you could do that without question
And
because that's
you
his
know
style
what?
of play.
And you know who else I might throw out there potentially that could make sense? Sam Poulin.
Yeah,
Like I think that he's physical enough. It's just you gotta work with him on his two-way game.
yeah,
Work with him on his two-way game and try and get him in a good spot because I know those few games he came up during that Western Canada road trip last year, the underlying numbers were just atrocious. So,
right.
you know, and then we're gonna let's just move on to defense real quick. Obviously they need a top pairing left shot D. Somebody who's capable of moving the puck. And I'm just gonna throw this one out there. Given how much Mike Sullivan was lobbying for Jacob Chikrin last year, if Noah Hannafin becomes available in Calgary, that is most likely the guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and
Yep.
I've also heard that Mike Sullivan also likes the idea of Ryan Graves. Which is it would be a tricky situation. It all comes down to term, in my opinion. But like, if you can get him on like a 3 or 4 year deal, I think that would be okay. It's just I don't want them to sign him to like a 6 or 7 year deal because he kind of plays that same style that Brian Dumoulin played in his prime,
Right.
which means you're probably only getting 3 to 4 good years out of him.
How do we feel about Orlov?
I
Is he
think he's gonna. I think he's gonna get paid too much money, dude. Like I think somebody's gonna throw a freaking bag at him.
available? Say, I know that's. I'm just looking at like available defensemen, and he's the top one for left-handed D, like you said. And again, he is 31, so he's starting to get up there a little bit. Just some other ones. Gostis Bear, he kind of turned it on with Carolina as well. Jake Gardner is an interesting one here too. Who else do we see here? Hmm.
Eric Gustafson might be somebody like as like a second, potentially third pairing option.
He was one
Because I know,
that yeah, he did well with the Caps at the end there. Sorry about that.
yeah,
But yeah, he was doing well with the Caps, and again, Dubas brought him up to Toronto, so there's some
yep,
familiarity there.
yeah. Vladislav Gavrikov, what do you think there? Might be okay.
Yeah, I was thinking him. I'm looking at him here. Carson Susie's another one from Seattle potentially.
Carson Soucy would be ideal in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Like because like he's in that weird class of defensemen. Like I think of him as the same way I thought of like Brad Hunt whenever he was like really, really good in Minnesota. Is like he's never gonna make a bunch of money. So like,
Serviceable.
yeah, like it kind of reminds me of honestly like a better version of when the Pens signed Cody Cece that year.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah,
can be serviceable. But other than that, man, the defense market's pretty weak.
yeah, and there's yeah, and the majority of them are just right-handed guys, which the Penguins don't need more right-handed defensemen. They've already
I
got too
mean,
many as it is to begin with.
you might need him if you move Jeff Petrie though.
Possibly.
And if you move Petrie and Ruda, the door just kicks wide open for them to pay Damon Sievers,
Right.
which would be cool.
Mhm.
You know, we also got to keep in mind a lot of this might come in trades. Like a lot of this may come in the way of trades. I was looking today at a potential we saw how Dubas likes doing first round pick swaps whenever he's trying to unload a contract. You know, I know Chicago has a later first this year from the Brandon Hagel trade to Tampa Bay. So like who's to say that they couldn't, do a pick swap and take on Mikhail Granlund and potentially Ruda or something like that. And at their full cap hits and they get a lottery pick in return. Because honestly, man, I'm not really worried about these first round picks at this point. I have a good feeling on how Mike Sullivan's going to approach this with working with Kyle. And it's going to be like all these prospects they have and these guys they're drafting. He wants to use them as currency to make this team better right now.
Yeah, I mean that's what he's probably looking at. He's thinking, Dubas obviously sees us some flaws in this team, and there's plenty there to choose from. Like you said with Petrie, that's just it's an interesting one. Same with Ruda, where it's like, okay, can we really find out what these guys? Let's find out what these guys can actually bring in and what they're worth. And again, just looking at Petrie here, obviously, you got 2 years left with him. He's already 35, and there's and there's that no movement clause too. Same with Ruda. He's 32 with 2 years left. I think you have if you are going to move someone, I think you got a better chance moving Ruda than Petrie at least. Obviously, Petrie's got the no movement, and plus, I don't know what the market looks like for a 35-year-old defenseman who's coming off off an injury riddled season. So, it's going to be really tough to see how that situation plays out. Me personally, I just think Ruda's got a better chance of getting moved around than Petrie does.
Yeah, because Ruda's contract is rather cheap for what he does.
Yeah, very affordable.
And he's capable of playing top four. So like a rebuilding team could find just crazy value in that.
Definitely. Yep.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, moving forward though, obviously they're going to do a GM search. I saw some names dropped yesterday. I expect them to cycle back to Matthew Darsh from Tampa as he was one of the last guys in the running for this job that Dubas took. And another one that saw that I found really interesting is Cam Lawrence, who's currently an analytical consultant with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Cam is the guy that worked with the Panthers that was solely responsible for finding Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith, and Carter Verhaeghe as well. So like that's a good track record for him. And I'd like to see them look into him. And another option I really, really like, because like obviously they're going to go the data scientist route. They're going to go somebody who's good with analytics and is able to work with Kyle and probably help him through some things that he may not have a full grasp on. But Sam Ventura, I would love to have Sam Ventura come back to this organization as the general manager. He was the data analyst in 16 and 17 when they won the back-to-back cups. Went to Carnegie Mellon. Currently has a job in Buffalo with the Sabres. I believe he's I think he's the assistant GM. I'm double checking this right now. He's the VP of hockey strategy and research. So basically he's just like their lead analytics guy. I know that he does a lot of good things in terms of contract extensions. Like I believe he's the one who did Marcus Pettersson's extension, which has been great value. He did the John Marino extension. And in Buffalo, you can see he did the Matthias Samuelsson extension. He's the one who has Tage Thompson on that great contract, and he also got that Dylan Cousins contract done at a similar cap number to what Tage is. So he's good at negotiating. He's good at doing contracts where it's friendly for both sides, but also provides great value for the team as well.
Yeah, I mean, you just rattled off all those names right there. Those are all great contracts that were put together by him, obviously. So, that's the biggest challenge for any GM is finding a deal that not only the player appreciates, but one that's, not going to hurt your team financially. That's going to, keep them, in a competitive state. So if that's what they're working, if that's one of their options too to explore, I'm all for it. Now we threw around the name Eric Tolsky, right?
Yeah.
Was one that we've mentioned a time or two.
Yeah.
What's the word on him? Is that still an option going forward, or do you think he might be sticking around with Carolina or going somewhere else?
I think that he might pop up somewhere else. I know that he was one of the earlier wave people that Fenway told they were out that was out on this job. So I'm not sure if Dubas will be able to reach out to him and cycle back to him and see what's going on and see where his head's at. But like, you know, you still got to think there's a whole situation that could potentially go down in Ottawa once that sell of the Senators goes through,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that would be the perfect job for Tulsky to take because of how young and how young that roster is and how loaded their prospect pool is
Oh yeah,
still with all those names on the roster right now.
yeah, that would be right up his alley. That would definitely be a good move for him going forward. So
Yeah.
that situation's been really interesting in Ottawa too. Obviously, just with them trying to figure out what the team's going to do going forward, and you really don't want to butcher this one either because you look at that roster. They could be they're going to be so good here in the next year, in the next 4 or 5 years going forward too.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a team that's just a good goalie away from just being disgusting.
Right.
Like because people forget because of how underwhelming they were, but like Tim Stützle was just incredible this year, you know,
Yeah.
and I think Brady Kachuk still can show more. Obviously, they have Drake Batherson and Josh Norris amongst a bunch of other guys, you know, and Giroux was the perfect fit for them in terms of getting a veteran. You
Yeah.
know,
And
that's also what were you gonna say?
yes, I was just saying he's still like, he's obviously an older player, but not to the point where, it feels like you're dragging grandpa along. Like he's
Right.
still, very serviceable to a team. And I mean, I think he had 30 goals this year, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that'll
know,
that'll help you win a lot of games.
and he's like one that you think of. He's a player you think of whenever you think of what the market for Ryan O'Reilly could be like. You know, like teams will be calling Ryan O'Reilly's agent trying to pitch a Giroux type idea to him.
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
Some they were they're pretty close in age, I think. I
yeah,
think Drew might have a year or two on him, I believe,
yeah,
but
probably.
yeah, that's definitely one where you can see how well he does. I don't know if he'll get as much as Giroux does, but it's definitely it's possible because unlike Giroux, I think he has more of that two-way game too, which every
Yes,
team's going to fall in love with. So
yes,
there's definitely a potential there for O'Reilly to get his payday for sure.
yeah. But with O'Reilly, like it's probably between like 4.5 and 5 for a cap number, in my opinion, on probably like
Mm-hmm.
a 2 to 3 year deal. Which I mean, if the Penguins have the flexibility to do it, like I'm all about it. I'm all in on it. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, we were paying Mikhail Granlund $5 million for God's sake. You know, like that's the way I see it. Is like I know everybody gets like anxious about like spending money in free agency, but like whenever you see some of the people that they've shelled out money to in the past via trade, it's like okay, like this might have to be the way.
yeah. Cap's
You know,
going up too, anyways. So I mean,
well, yeah, the cap's going to skyrocket, and you're getting great value out of all of your core right now in terms of cap hit and money. You know, um, but yeah, what else do you want to touch on? Anything you have in your mind?
outside of the Pens, obviously, we think we should touch a little bit on the Stanley Cup final that is starting tomorrow. Just I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. Just the improbable run that Florida is on. I mean, we talked about them being in Toronto. We didn't even mention them knocking off Boston. The best regular season team statistically in NHL history, and they beat them in 7 games. I don't think I've ever seen, my dad and I were watching that game that night. I don't think I've ever seen him get that excited about another team losing, and it had no impact on 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 another team losing that wasn't playing the Penguins. Like
Yeah.
he's never been that excited. He just wanted to see Boston lose. And that was such a great effort by Florida. They put it together perfectly. And they have not taken their foot off the gas after that series. After they beat Boston, it's literally been, we're riding this thing till the wheels fall off.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of that comes from Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, that guy took a huge step forward this year. In a year where the Panthers organization definitely needed it, because let's be honest, on the day that trade went down, that trade looked pretty damn shady. You didn't know how it was going to go, but as of right now, Matthew Tkachuk has probably cemented himself amongst the top 5 best players in this league and the top 5 best players in the world. His skill set is so unique, and it makes him so much more valuable than what he already is, because he can play that playoff style game. Like, he can play that grit and grind, beat the living crap out of guys if he has to, but he's also has the talent of a 100+ point scorer.
Yeah, that's one thing. Like people have been making the comparison about him and his old man and how they play that similar net front type of game. Kachuk, but with Matthew, it's like his hands are just amazing. He's got such sick hands that he can, make moves in tight like that you don't really see a lot of guys able to pull off, and he does it with relative easiness. So I like what I've seen from him, and that whole team has just seemed to come together lately too. I mean, you look at how other guys have stepped up. For Hagee, obviously we talked about him earlier. He's done his thing as well. The back ends stepped up great, and the biggest one, in my opinion, of all, has been the emergence of the $10 million man, Sergei Bobrovsky.
Yeah, I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky is on a tear right now. Like, this Stanley Cup final is pretty much the closing act on his career renaissance at this point. Like, this is going to be the defining moment of his career if he's able to close this out. And another person that needs talked about is Brandon Montour.
Yeah.
Like, that guy is so good now. Whenever probably 2-3 years ago, he was one of the worst defensemen in the NHL. And now he's popped off like he has.
Yeah, he's been huge for them this year as well, too. I mean, obviously we talked about how we've talked in the past about Ekblad and the injury trouble he had. The fact that Montour pretty much stepped in with little to no issue with it is just a testament to how deep that team is and how well structured they are. And it's crazy to think too, because there was a point where they were one of the bottom teams in the league. You know what I mean? Like it was a catastrophic season for them, because it's like we won the President's Trophy the year before, and now we're DFL in our own division. Like this couldn't get much worse. And to see the total 180 they've done, there's really not much else you can say about it for Florida.
Yeah, and this is another thing that's a testament to team building. Like, that team is stacked lines 1 through 4. You have Verhaeghe, you have Anthony Duclair, you have a bunch of other guys, you have Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart as well. Like, it's a team that's very, very well structured and very well put together. And, it's going to be interesting to see how they finagle their cap situation going into the summer. But they have prospects that are able to come up. You're going to have Mackie Samoskevich ready to go next year. Grigory Denisenko has already had a couple games up in the NHL. He'll be ready to take a spot next year, probably somewhere in your top 9. And I feel like I give them the edge over Vegas right now, because yes, Vegas does have a lot of star power and a lot of talent, but I feel like Florida's more balanced lines 1 through 4.
Yeah, definitely. That's probably the case. I mean, I think we were debating earlier was with a couple of people. Is like, what are we expecting, a low scoring or high scoring final between these two teams? Because I feel like, obviously Vegas has the firepower. Not saying that Florida doesn't, but it's like, how great of a game is Aiden Hill and Sergei Bobrovsky going to play in this final as well?
Well, I think it's going to be very back and forth because you can definitely make the argument that they're to the point in this entire run where the wheels might start to fall off the bus a little bit. Like they've, up until this point, it's like they've given pretty much all they could possibly give to get their teams to this point.
Yeah, I mean they've exhausted all they can, like you said earlier. So it's going to be quite the final. I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys can do. Now, one more thing I want to touch on here. It's obviously been a topic of discussion. The two teams up north, Toronto and Edmonton, fall short again of expectations. I think this applies more to Toronto than it does Edmonton, but I still think it's worth the conversation. We'll start with Edmonton, I guess. At least I'll start with Edmonton. How much longer do you think McDavid and or Draisaitl want to deal with what's going on here before they start at least looking at other options, saying, hey, maybe I can't win here?
I mean, Edmonton's going to be in a similar situation that Toronto's in this year coming, because Draisaitl's a UFA at the end of the year too. So if things are a mess there in both areas, there's a very, very high probability that you have two of the best players in the world hitting the UFA market at the same time.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. Draisaitl's got, this upcoming season and the following on his deal, and McDavid's got this year and 2 more after that. And I think a lot of it's going to gauge on just what ends up happening with Draisaitl, because if I'm Connor McDavid, I'm playing the waiting game. I'm waiting to see what that guy does first.
Yeah,
it's because, right? I mean, this goes without saying probably, but regardless, if I'm Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl leaves, no chance in hell I'm staying in Edmonton.
Yeah,
there's no way.
There's no need.
Because I don't care what player you bring in to replace him, you can't. You couldn't do it. I mean, those guys are let me check real quick here. How many times do you see a guys have 153 and 128 points play on the same team? That's almost never happens. Definitely doesn't happen nowadays. That's an 80 stat.
I mean, we should have had it. We should have had it with Malkin and Sid, but Sid got the concussions at the wrong time.
Right. So I mean,
yeah, I mean, but literally, like it's crazy how similar both those teams are, because their biggest problem boils down to the goaltending position.
Yeah,
you can make the argument that if both teams got more competent goaltending, they could easily make a conference final run, if not more.
Yeah, that was the thing with Edmonton. It's like, even when it was pretty obvious, okay, Campbell doesn't have his stuff this year, Stuart Skinner still looked fine.
Yeah.
And then he, craps down his leg in the finals.
Yeah.
It's like, what is going on?
It's hard because, like, Campbell being that bad and that inconsistent put Stuart Skinner in such a difficult spot. He probably never worked a workload like that before in his career. And, it caught up to him in the end.
Yeah.
Same thing with Samsonov.
Yeah. I mean, that's completely right. Because there were a ton of games there where Samsonov just had to hold it down going down the stretch there. I mean,
yeah.
So screw it. Let's go to Toronto right now, because, as much as we talked about the Penguins having their, their time to focus on what they're going to do going forward. It's way more extreme up north right now for those guys. Because I mean, the big question that everybody's been asking is, how can you possibly keep that core four together?
Yeah, and they're going into a very difficult situation this year. You're you're switching things up. You're probably leaving Austin Matthews feel some type of way because it seems like the groundwork for an extension was already laid down between him and Dubas before Dubas got fired. And now, all of that's going directly out the window. And they also replace Kyle with a guy who literally a year prior let two of the best players in the league, in Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau, walk. Like, and everybody's going to run the storyline of, oh, he's going to get his redemption here. He's going to get his redemption here. But here's the thing. I don't trust him. I think he's going to try and play hardball with Matthews. Matthews is going to get mad and Matthews is going to walk.
So I'd say that begs the question then, I guess. I mean, outside of Matthews, if you had to part ways with one, maybe even two players on that core four, who are you prioritizing to keep, and who are you saying, okay, thanks for everything. Best of luck to you.
It's such a difficult situation because in a lot of ways, you would think it would be difficult to move Marner and Tavares. The asset out of that core four that will be the easiest to move outside of Matthews, because Matthews is one of the best players in the NHL, would be Nylander, because you have cap flexibility as well as positional flexibility with Nylander that will entice teams. You can't move Mitch and you can't move Tavares without doing like a Kawhi for DeRozan type trade in the NHL.
I still think that, I think that isn't out of the realm of possibility, at least with Marner.
Yeah.
I think that's a deal that could potentially happen. I mean, just thinking here, one team that I saw got mentioned with him. Sorry to cut you off there, Dougie. One team that I saw that got mentioned with Marner potentially was Carolina.
Yeah.
And you think about it, they're getting a lot. They're about to have they're going to have not maybe $6 million off their books, but they're going to have Jordan Staal at a reduced price now because there's no way he's making $6 next year.
Right.
So, is that a situation where you go, hey, I'm willing to part ways with a Teuvo Teravainen?
I don't know. I feel like, in my opinion, if they were to go that route, I feel like Carolina would find a way to dump off the Kotkaniemi contract, because then you have about $11 million to work with to fit Mitch in. And, the offer would be Marty Necas, Seth Jarvis, and picks or prospects. I think that's probably the best that Carolina would have to offer in that type of situation. Unless, for some reason, Brad Treliving goes rogue and just randomly becomes enamored with Brett Pesce or something.
Right.
Going
back to Nylander, another team that I saw with him that would also make sense too is Colorado.
Yeah.
Because there's a pretty good chance Landeskog's missing this year. That's what it sounds. I'm pretty sure they already confirmed he's missing this year.
That's LTIR money right there, man.
Right.
That's cap space.
They're still up in the air on what the Nichushkin situation is going to be like.
Right.
So,
and you got to think, you have Bowen Byram to dangle as a trade piece, and he's a guy you technically probably don't even need.
No, not really. Not when you have Makar.
You can dangle him or Sam Girard.
It's nice having good players that, are expendable. You remember those days?
this is why I'm ready to just run through a wall for Kyle Dubas. Um, because I just hope that we're able to get to this point.
Baby steps, Dougie. We'll get. I hope it's the windshield's bigger than the rear view mirror.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, yeah, yeah, we gotta. There's a lot of stuff he needs to clean up.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, honestly, like I would not be surprised to see something go down with one of the core four guys in the next year and a half or so.
Oh, I don't even know if we'll have to wait that long.
I don't know. I mean, they keep saying in all the media availabilities that Shanahan and Tree Living have both said they want to keep all four of them together, but who knows? That could just be posturing.
I just don't think it's possible anymore. I don't think it is. You've had how many chops at the tree with that group, and they're still coming up short.
You know, and my whole other thing is like, could they just move Morgan Riley? Because like you got to think like it was to the point in the playoffs where Morgan Riley was playing third pair.
Hmm.
You
I
know,
feel
I
like that's one of those situations where if you move that guy, you're losing. You're not only losing your locker room, you're losing a lot. I think you're going to lose some of the fan base too.
yeah, because
That's a really tough move to explain to somebody.
well, yeah,
Because it's one thing where you got to remember Morgan Riley's been there through everything. Like
he's literally yeah, he's their identity.
yeah, he's been there through it all.
Yeah,
He's seen the best and the worst of that team. If you moved him out, I think you're in danger of losing a lot more than just Morgan Riley. I think you lose. Matthews would definitely walk at that point.
yes,
There's no
yeah,
way
that's
he's
true.
staying then because if you, I mean,
That's true.
they're buddy. So I would
Yeah,
see with the respect that Morgan has with that locker room, with that city, if anyone ever even thought about moving out Morgan Riley, I they got a death wish.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Makes sense. All right, what else do you have? What are you thinking?
I'm trying to think what else is going on that we haven't
Draft lottery,
touched on. I know. It's like
draft lottery.
right, draft lottery.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it sucks that Chicago got Bedard, but at the same time, like from a business perspective, it probably makes the most sense. It's a big market that needs a restart. You know, it's a market that generates the league a boatload of money, and they needed to have the means to retool that on the fly because, good lord, has that team been a train wreck?
I get that. But there's also a part of me that, I've done my research and watched all the stuff about, the old Penguin teams prior to the arrival of Mario Lemieux.
Mm-hmm.
They were horrendous. If you've ever seen the Playing to Lose documentary done by TSN, they did it probably close to 10 years ago now. Great documentary. Take some time out of your day if you get a chance to watch it because it's a really great piece. But anyway, you look at how the Penguins were on the fringe of, moving back in those days and how Mario literally came in and saved the team. You're trying to tell me that like Connor Bedard couldn't do wonders. Like he couldn't have the same type of effect in an Arizona or a Columbus. Outside, I mean, Columbus, I don't want to say they've never had a superstar. They did have Rick Nash for a while, and
Right.
anybody who knew Rick Nash back then was a beauty. He just didn't have any help.
Yeah.
It's different with the Coyotes, who have never really had that true superstar player. That is a franchise changing player. If
Right.
you could have brought that guy in, I wanted them to draft McDavid when he was available in 2015.
Yeah.
I wanted that one to come together too, just because that they also had Domi and Duclair back then. Mm-hmm. So you could have reunited, that World Junior line from Canada.
Yeah.
So it's just one of the, I like you said, like I get the business side of it, but to me, I think Chicago's got 3 Stanley Cup banners to hang their hat on. They're gonna find good players again. They're gonna
Yes.
run a good team back. I would have much rather seen Connor Bedard go to a market that is thirsting for a superstar like that, who's never really had one and could instantly turn the franchise, or I won't say instantly turn them around, but put them on the right path, because they've never, like a franchise like the Coyotes have never had that, and Columbus wasn't able to take advantage of theirs. So
Well, I think if Columbus won the draft lottery, if they got good goaltending out of Elvis, odds are they would have made the playoffs his rookie year. Like that was the best equipped team for him to go to in terms of having immediate success.
yeah,
Because, you got to think he had right off the bat, he had Line, Gaudreau,
Goudreau.
Kirill Marchenko, Kent Johnson, Cole Sillinger, Hexier's coming back, Boone Jenner. Like they had a loaded forward group, and been they would have had potential to become a matchup nightmare from lines 1 through 3.
Would have been very similar to what Sid had when he first arrived, in a sense.
Yes.
Definitely by year
Yeah.
two, at least by year two,
Yeah. By year 2, it would have probably been a second Penguins, you know? And I mean, Anaheim would have been awesome too, because he would have played with McTavish, you know? He would have played with McTavish. It would have given Zegras the freedom to be a number 2 center and just go do what he does and, be that guy who does like absolutely like insane stuff to help grow the game, but yeah, it's unfortunate, but like also at the same time, don't count Chicago out, because Chicago's always a free agent destination. So like odds are they're gonna be active.
Oh yeah. How can you
They're
not
gonna be
be?
active. They're gonna find ways to put a good roster around Bedard sooner rather than later. And on top of that, like they drafted very well last year. They drafted very well. They drafted well the year before. The only thing that's missing out of this entire thing is I I personally would not have traded Kirby Doc.
Yeah, that was one where you could just tell they were making it pretty obvious. Hey, we're going for number one.
Yeah, exactly.
We're just gonna
Exactly.
burn this bridge now.
And they knew that he would be talented enough to potentially keep them out of that if he was getting top line minutes.
Right. Which he
You
would
know,
have. Mm-hmm.
yes. Yes. But let me tell you, it's gonna be like that John Cena versus The Rock meme for Connor Bedard's first NHL game whenever he comes out on a line with Jason Dickinson and Tyler Johnson. It's gonna be hysterical. Yeah.
Quite the trio.
Yeah. All right. What do you think we wrap this up now?
That's good to me, man.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching another episode of Forechecking TV. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Forechecking TV, and be sure to look for us on YouTube. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.